If you've tried and failed to manage your budget in any app, especially YNAB, and it just hasn't stuck, this video is for you. I'm Nick True, and I've personally coached over 1,000 people on how to use YNAB, and I'm ready to help you through all the tough spots that I see my clients get tripped up. 10 years ago, my wife Hannah and I were newly married and fighting about money a lot. Thankfully, I figured out how to use YNAB, and that helped facilitate more meaningful conversations with Hannah around our values. All of a sudden, we felt like we were playing life with a cheat code. We had a budget in YNAB that reflected the things we valued, and we both had access to it at our fingertips. Not only were we making progress on long-term savings and retirement goals, which made me happy, we were also able to spend more on things that mattered to us on a daily basis, which made Hannah especially happy, all because we learned how to use YNAB to help us effectively manage our money. I want you and your family to stop feeling stressed out and stuck with your money, and instead experience the financial freedom and relationship growth that comes from a values-based budget. And getting the hang of YNAB is step number 1. So let's dive in. Once you sign up for YNAB, you'll want to start a new budget and give it a name. Now, if you've already got a budget, but you would like to kind of start over with me, I would click in this top left-hand corner, click New Budget, and we'll do that together. So I'm going to call this 2025 New Budget. Now, at the beginning, we're going to ignore this budget screen here, and the first thing we're going to do is actually start by adding a new bank account. I found that for most people, it makes more sense to start with a bank account since everything on the budget screen actually comes from the bank accounts themselves. Now, if you would like to follow along with me, there's a link down in the description below or in the comment section where you can download my YNAB checklist, which include routines and a flowchart for targets and all sorts of stuff in there. But this checklist that I've created is what we're going to be following for the rest of this video. So we've got the budget ready to go. We're now ready to set up our checking account. I'm going to pop back over here. And the first thing I'll need to do is decide whether I want to link or unlink my checking account. Linked is going to be where you actually connect YNAB to your bank and it will download the transactions for you. This is going to make most sense for most people, although for some people, they don't like to do this or they just can't. Maybe their bank doesn't work with YNAB or they're outside the country and they need to use a third-party plugin. But most people, you're going to choose linked. And then I'm going to go ahead and add a brand new connection. And then we'll need to tell YNAB what the financial institution is. If you don't see it listed here, you can start to type in your institution. I'm going to type in Capital One and pull this up. All right, now what's going to happen is they're going to open up a new tab and I'm going to have to go log into my actual Capital One account. I'm going to do that here. I'll say continue. I need to tell YNAB that yes, it's okay to share the account details so that they can download my transactions. And success. There we go. Now, by default, I could go ahead and select all and add all the bank accounts at this bank, but I don't want to do that because I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about what accounts to add and what not to add here in a minute. I'm just going to add the checking for now. Hit next. I'm also going to edit this and change the name. I like to change the name, and then I like to put the last 4 digits in the name. This makes it way easier when I get to making transfers down the road. And then next, and done. Now, my first checking account is added, and we can tell that it is linked because you'll notice it has this little bitty check mark right here next to the bank account. That tells us that it is connected to the bank account and that it will pull in the transactions as they start to process from the bank itself. Now, I'm going to go ahead and add in another checking account just to show you that. I'm going to click linked again. You'll see I now have added an additional connection with Mercury Bank. It's another old bank account that I have but don't really use a lot of anymore. I've got this checking. I'm going to click next. Click edit again. We're going to do Mercury 001, checking, and next, and done. All right, we're going to pop back over here to our setup checklist. We've added the checking accounts. Now we're going to go to our savings accounts. Now, before I talk about savings accounts, you need to understand that YNAB has a few different account types, overarching account types. If I come up here to add account, I'm going to choose unlinked for now just to show you. You'll notice here that when I select what type of account I'm adding, there's a whole bunch of options, but there are 3 main types. So there's budget accounts, there's mortgage and loans, and then there's tracking accounts. For brand new people, or if you've tried YNAB before and it's really been hard or you've gotten stuck and you're starting again, I would highly recommend that you keep this as simple as possible and add as few bank accounts as possible. I'm actually basically only going to encourage you to add the stuff that you use on a day-to-day basis. Normally for most people, that's going to be a checking, maybe a credit card or 2, and that's it. We will talk about savings accounts here in a second, but if you're not planning on using that money day in, day out, week in, week out, I would encourage you not to add it in for now. You can always come back once you get the hang of this in a couple of months and add all of your stuff in here if you would like to. So for this tutorial, we're not really going to cover mortgages and loans. Anything that is a mortgage or a loan that we're going to set up here in a minute, we're just not going to add an account for that. This is for tracking the balance of that debt and paying it down over time, not just the payment. We'll deal with that in a minute. Now, the tracking accounts, these are for if you want to track something to get an idea of your holistic financial picture. So if you wanted to track an investment account or an emergency savings account that you don't really touch on a day-to-day basis, but you do want it in YNAB so that you can track net worth. That's where tracking accounts come in. Again, for this beginner's guide, we're not going to add any tracking accounts in here. We're just going to focus on these budget accounts here, the stuff that you're using every month. Now, let's talk about savings. I would encourage you that if you've struggled with YNAB at all in the past and you're new, I would encourage you to not even add your savings accounts into YNAB at all for the first couple of weeks. Why do I say that? Well, because YNAB has one big fundamental mindset shift that you need to understand when it comes to bank accounts that are listed here as on-budget accounts. And that's that YNAB is going to put all of the money into one big pile. It's going to make your savings account money accessible just like your checking account money. And while that's really good, it's really, really hard for people who are just starting out and are used to thinking about their savings account as separate money. It's why over here, you'll notice in my checklist, I have choose method 1, 2, or 3. I actually have a dedicated video on my channel called the YNAB Multi-Account Guide that talks about the 3 different methods for setting up your savings accounts. And I typically tell people to try method number 1, which is don't set them up, or if you do, set them up as tracking accounts. Get them outside the budget when you're brand new. Again, the reason I do this is because most people tend to think of their savings account as money set aside for a specific job. Maybe they have a savings account that is for emergency purposes, like medical or auto maintenance or home maintenance. Maybe they have a dedicated savings account for short-term savings, like Christmas or travel. Well, what happens is when you put that in YNAB, it's going to get mixed in with everything else. I'm going to go ahead and add one just to kind of show you. So if I go back here, we're going to click Linked, Mercury. I'm going to click Mercury Savings. Now you'll notice that YNAB is going to default to selecting it as a savings account. If I did want to set this up as an asset outside the budget, I could do that by clicking here and coming down and choosing asset. But I'll go ahead and add it in here as a savings just to kind of show you what that looks like. Like I said though, for many of you, you can just skip this step. Done. We'll come back over here and we are now ready to set up our credit cards. Now, similar to savings accounts, I'm going to recommend that you only add credit cards that you are actively charging to. So if you are carrying a balance on a card and you're paying down that card, but you're not putting new charges on it, I would recommend not adding that account for now. I'm only going to add accounts that I'm actively putting new charges on. So I'm going to hit Linked and we're going to choose this Discover. And here, and next, and again, Discover Miles, 0529, and next, and done. And to get prepared for some examples here in a minute, I'm going to go ahead and add another unlinked credit card. We're going to choose credit card. I'm going to say the current balance is $4,850, next, and done. All right, let's go to the next one. Now, the next step is to set up a wallet account if you want to track cash. I will go ahead and tell you that, again, most people should not do this, but I do have it on here because it's something you should consider. Basically, if you use cash a lot on a day-to-day basis, like maybe you live in a foreign country and you have to use a lot of cash, or for whatever reason you're using a lot of cash, you would need to click Add Account, Unlinked, and then I would typically call this Wallet, and the account type is going to be cash, of course. And it has to be unlinked because you can't link to your wallet. And then you would put in a manual balance, and then you have to manually update this and keep track of it. It's kind of a lot of pain, and most people don't use cash enough these days to warrant this. But if that's you, add that in. Now, this next step, before we get into step number 6, it's actually not on here, but I should add it. And I like to go ahead and just triple check the starting balances of the bank accounts. For some reason, sometimes YNAB will pull in the incorrect starting balance. Basically what happens is they will pull in the balance that is the pending balance, meaning the balance that includes pending transactions. Sometimes this is called the available balance at your bank. And I want to make sure that YNAB has pulled in the cleared balance, okay? So if you go to your bank and you log in and see, you're going to see an available balance, which is going to show the balance including pending charges. And then you're also going to show a posted or cleared balance. Let me just show you what I mean. So I'm going to come over here to the real Mercury account that I have, and you'll notice that I have an available balance right here. And then I also show a current balance. Now, it just so happens that right now they do match, but oftentimes the available balance will include pending transactions. And I want to make sure that the current balance is what I show in YNAB. Now you'll notice in this case, YNAB actually pulled in the current balance as of yesterday, and then the pulled in one transaction as of this morning. And so at this moment, my cleared balance 157647 does match my current balance here, 157647. And so I'm good to go. I can hit the reconcile button, lock this in place. Kind of skipping ahead, I have another video on reconciling. You can check that out. But essentially what I want to do is check each one very quickly. So I'm going to come to this checking. I would go log into this checking account and make sure that that's correct. In this case, it is. I'm going to go ahead and actually add in some fake money to give us some money to play with here in a bit. Mercury Savings, same thing. I'm going to add in some fake money, but I would be checking to see if this is correct. Discover Miles, same thing. I would be checking to see if this is correct. And the Chase credit card, same thing, making sure that the outflow is correct because this is a credit card. A lot of people get confused. They get weirded out by this negative here. That just means that you owe the credit card this money, right? So this is the total outstanding balance on the card, whereas these are all positive accounts, and that's the total available amounts there. Once I've verified that my starting balances are good to go and I've locked those in, I'm ready to move on to step number 6 on our getting started checklist, which is to create and organize your categories and category groups. I'm going to pop back over here. Now you're going to notice that YNAB has sort of defaulted to their bills, frequent, non-monthly goals, and quality. Yours also may say something like bills, wants, and needs. Those are a couple different default setups that YNAB has. Now, if you want, YNAB's got a whole list of other templates at ynab.com/templates where you can actually click on different templates that they have here and import them into your budget, which is kind of cool. Maybe one day they'll let me have one of these. But for now, I'm going to delete theirs and I'm going to start with my own. So I'm going to right click on bills, hit delete, right click on frequent, delete, monthly, delete, 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 and there we go. Next, what I'm going to do is start by adding my category groups. So that's going to be this button in the top left-hand corner. This will add a brand new group, and then underneath the groups, we can add in our categories. Now, I'm going to do these in reverse order of what I want to see on my setup because YNAB puts them in kind of a new one at the top every single time. So I'm going to start with reimbursements. Then I'm going to have a savings. And in fact, I call this one wealth building a lot of the time. You'll see why here in a second. Then I'm going to have short-term savings. Sometimes I'll even add the word on budget after this. Again, you'll see why in a second. Next, I've got irregular and annual. Then I'm going to have a kids group. Then a monthly living group. Then I'm going to do fund spending. Then I'm going to have a dedicated category for a debt snowball group and bills. And then this last one's optional, but I found a lot of people like it. I'll have a 1 month ahead group, and we'll explain that more in a second. So this is going to be my starting out for my category groups. Now, before we dive into the categories, let me explain one more quick thing. No doubt at this point, you've started to notice the big green ready to assign right up top, and you might be wondering what that is. Well, that is the amount of money in my bank accounts that has not yet been told what to do. If you're not familiar, YNAB is what's known as a zero-based budgeting tool. So that means that here in a few minutes, we are going to budget every single dollar dollar. We're going to give every dollar a job until ready to assign goes down to zero. Right now, ready to assign represents all of the money that I have access to across my different bank accounts. And if you're paying attention and doing some math here, you'll notice that this checking account here plus this Mercury account plus this Mercury savings account all added together is equal to my ready to assign plus this uncategorized transaction right here. Again, we're going to get to that in a few minutes. For now, we are focused on the category groups and the categories. Once we get all that in place, then we can move on to sort of our routines and actually using this thing. So let me come back to the category groups and categories. Now, what you're going to notice here, the way I've set this up is what I like to call a hybrid budget structure. See, overarchingly, you can have kind of one of two structures. One structure is where you've really got everything dialed in based on the due dates. So this is what I call a cash flow management structure or a due date based structure. This is where you're organizing things purely based on when you need the money. And so you're going to have a structure that is like bills, frequent, non-monthly, irregular, weekly, annual, twice annual. You're going to have groups that are all about timelines and when you need the money. In fact, I've set up some budgets for clients who get paid weekly or, bi-weekly, where they'll actually do a first and second half of the month, or they'll do a week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. And if you want to go with a super due date based structure, you can totally do that. On the far end of the other side, we have what I call a values-based structure. Now, this structure is where you're organizing your groups where it doesn't really matter at all when something is due. What matters is what that thing is for. You'll notice, for example, I'll show you, this is an excerpt from mine and my wife's real budget that we actually use on a day-to-day basis. And you'll notice that all of the groupings here, none of them have anything to do with when something is needed or when something is due. You'll notice instead we have things like joy. And if I open that up, you'll see that's like art supplies and date nights and fun spending money, but it also includes entertainment subscriptions, which are bills. If I come down here to home, you'll notice that there's the mortgage, which is monthly, and utilities, which are monthly, but also includes pest control, which is quarterly, and small home improvements and large home renovations, which are irregular. And yet all of them go into the home group because they are home-related expenses. And so if you're looking for more of a values-based structure, you can get a copy of that again in the same document as my checklist. It's down at the bottom. If you scroll down here, you'll see a couple different structures. First is the hybrid structure, which is what we're going to use in this video, and then a values-based structure beneath that. But like I said, we're going to go with the hybrid structure. The hybrid structure kind of mixes the best of both worlds. It's got a little bit around due dates. You'll see like bills or monthly or irregular, which has to do with when I need the money. But then there's also some stuff that's grouping things based on values like kids or fun spending or savings for wealth building. Those are where I'm grouping things based on what that thing is primarily going to do for my life rather than when that thing is due. I will tell you that most beginners should start with more of a due date based approach or a hybrid approach. The values based approach is really, really helpful once you get into looking at reports and really analyzing your spending and trying to make better decisions. But in the early days, it's often about cash flow management, which a due date based or hybrid structure is going to help you with more. All that being said, it's time to add some categories. So underneath each group, if I hover my mouse over top of them, you'll notice that a little plus sign will come up and I can start to add individual categories underneath that grouping. For example, if I click on the bills and then I type phone and internet and hit enter, now I've got a phone and internet category underneath that group. Let's go ahead and add in a few more to the bills. I'm going to add in a gym membership, a Netflix bill, car insurance, Spotify, pet insurance, utilities, and a mortgage payment. Now, if you're following along, you may not have all of these bills. You might have some different ones. You might have some extra ones, but this is a good point for you to brainstorm what bills you've got and go ahead and add them in here. Now, if you've got one or two debts, or maybe you're mostly debt-free, you may not need this debt snowball group, but if you are working on a debt snowball, you've got a number of debts you're trying to sort of chip away at, I like having the dedicated debt snowball group where I'm actually separating that from the bills so that I can see more easily in the report reports how much is going towards that debt snowball every single month. Now, I also want to say at this point that if you miss something, it's okay. Just focus on trying to get the majority of your bills and the majority of the categories that you need. I'll also obviously be showing you all these other ones here in a second, so that'll probably prompt you to think about your own categories. But it's likely that you'll forget one or two things, and then ultimately over the next few weeks as you're categorizing transactions, you'll go, oh, yep, I forgot about that, and you'll need to add a brand new category in. Give it a month or two and you'll capture like 100% of what you need. But ultimately, just try and get the bulk of what you need down for now. Let's go ahead and do a debt snowball. Now, if I'm carrying a balance on credit cards and paying credit card interest, I will need a category for credit card interest. So I'm going to add that in. Next, I'm going to add a car loan. I'm going to add a personal loan. And I'm going to add the Amex Gold payment. Now, you'll notice I do not have an Amex Gold credit card in the budget, right? I only added the Discover and the Chase, and that's because I'm only adding the cards that I'm actively charging to. In this case, maybe I'm paying down an Amex Gold, but I'm not adding new charges to it, so I didn't add it as a bank account. Now, you'll notice I do not need to add categories for the cards that I've put into YNAB. YNAB adds their own credit card payment section right here, and you can't move these around. So I can move all these other ones, right? I can move these around. I can drag and drop all these groups and reorganize them. But the credit card payments one, this is created automatically to be dedicated and linked to the credit card accounts that we added in earlier. This will all make a lot more sense when we get to credit cards later in the video. For now, if you've got a debt snowball, just add all the categories in for that. And if you're using a debt snowball, I actually like to order these and organize them in terms of the debt snowball order I'd like to pay them down in. And I'm going to even add a number in here. This is kind of fun if I'm working on it, because then as I have extra money and I can hammer one of my debts, I kind of know exactly what I want to focus on, and it's very easy and clear to see where I need to use that extra cash. So I've got my bills done, my debt snowball done. I'm going to move on to the rest of these. Now, rather than making you sit here and watch me add them in here, I'm going to add them all in, and then I'll be right back with you. Now that I've added all my categories, let me briefly walk you through what I've done. Now, we've already talked about the bills and the debt snowball, but I do want to mention something for the sake of simplicity, which I really, really encourage when you're starting out. I want you to think about what categories you should combine and what categories you should break out. For example, you'll notice that I have combined my utilities category. I didn't break out electric, sewer, water, gas. But I did break out Netflix and Spotify, whereas I could have combined those to be entertainment subscriptions. Now, what you want to think about when it comes to this is what information will you actually use to change behavior? Will you use this, or are you breaking it out just to break it out? For example, with utilities, I've never met a single person in the history of my coaching that has said, you know what, the water bill has just gotten so high, that's it, I'm going to move. I'm selling this place. This is ridiculous. I've never met a single person who's done that. So why don't we just combine the water with utilities? Whereas maybe I do want to pay attention to Netflix and Spotify because I am thinking about whether or not I want to keep those at the moment. Ultimately, you get to decide what you want to break out and how detailed you want to go, but just kind of keep that question in the back of your mind as we go through here. So I'm going to come down to fund spending. Now, fund spending, you'll notice, is a mixture of some individual fund spending. So both me and Hannah each get a set amount of money every single month that we can decide to spend. This is really, really helpful for building some semblance of independence into the budget. We also break out and differentiate eating out versus like fast food takeout, Uber Eats type stuff. Entertainment, this is going to be like going to a concert or a comedy show or the movies. ATM cash, so this is going to be a category where you're going to the bank and getting cash out to then spend. Now, if you use that cash for a very specific purpose, like you get cash out every week to pay a cleaner or something like that, well then I would just have cleaner as part of my bills, and when I get the cash out of the ATM, I would categorize it as cleaner. But in the case of the ATM where I'm just getting cash out to spend, I'm going to put it into an ATM cash category. We also have home furnishings and decor in this one. Next, I've got a monthly living group. Now, monthly living, this is the stuff that isn't necessarily a bill, but it's not necessarily fun either, but it does happen pretty much every single month, or at least most months. And I want to kind of have it front and center. This is the stuff that we just use to live our day-to-day life. And so you'll notice I have a dedicated category for groceries, but I do combine that with households and cosmetics. Basically, if you buy it at the grocery store, I just combine it early on. Eventually, you can get fancy and do some split transactions, but that's down the road. Now, related, this is one where if you go look at my name in Reddit, you'll see a whole bunch of people arguing about this one. I do think for beginners, it's helpful to just combine all of your Amazon shopping or big box store shopping like Target into one category. The reason is because any amount of friction that you have to actually getting in here and using YNAB is going to be one extra thing that's going to just hold you back and keep you from sticking with it. So in the early days, if you buy something on Amazon, just categorize it to Amazon and move on. Don't try and break out all your different Amazon shopping. Now, once you get more comfortable, yes, I don't like to keep this forever, but this is us sort of putting the training wheels on the bike, so to speak, in the early days. And eventually, when you're ready, we'll take the training wheels off. Next, we've got gas, which is pretty self-explanatory. Then we have clothing essentials. Now, I like to add the word essentials here because this to me is needed clothing. Okay, if Hannah and I need socks or underwear, then it goes here. If I need a new shirt for work, it goes here. But if I buy something for fun, like this Jack Butcher internet pullover, guess what? That comes out of Nick's fun spending money. And so this clothing is for essentials. Next, we've got pet expenses, and so we just put everything related to the pet there except for the vet bills. And so this is going to be dog food, toys, treats, flea collars, all that stuff. Then we've got haircuts, we've got tithing and offerings, and then I do like to add one category called unexpected or junk drawer. Now, YNAB sometimes calls this stuff I forgot to budget for. You can call it miscellaneous. The point is, this is going to be kind of like an extra little slush fund for when stuff that you have to pay for but doesn't really fit anywhere else, it goes here. So I like to say this is an unexpected parking ticket. This is not an unexpected trip to Cancun. Okay, so this should be very small things. If you notice that this starts getting to be a very expensive category for you, you should probably do some digging and figure out what's going on there, because you probably just need to create a new category to represent whatever's actually going on. All right, the next group is, of course, the kids group. Now, this is one that can be kind of balloon on you if you're not careful. I like to start simple. So if the kids are over like 10-ish, preteen age, I think at that point it starts making good sense to have dedicated categories for each kid. And so you'll see here like a Nick Jr., Hannah Jr. type situation. If you got multiple kids, have a category for each one, because their activities start getting very different in terms of their expenses and different needs and stuff. You should also have a separate category for kids clothing, I think, from adult clothing, just because it gets very different. And then sometimes if you wanted to have a dedicated category, you could do that as well. Again, try to keep this simple in the early days, because if you're not careful, this is one of those groups that you can end up with just a ton of categories in. All right, next we want to come down to irregular and annual. So if you've seen my video on emergency savings and why I'm not a big fan of traditional emergency funds, part of it is because of this right here. I want to brainstorm and think about all the different things in my life that could trip me up. What are the different types of emergencies that can happen? And most of the time, the emergencies that we call emergencies, they can actually be predicted or planned for. Now, of course, I don't know when they're going to happen, at least not all of them, but I do know that it's likely they will happen. So I want to think about what are the things that might mess us up. Home maintenance and auto maintenance are chief at the top of this list. Let's just create categories for them and prepare ahead of time. Next, I've got vet medical. You'll notice, again, I separated that from my other pet expenses. Then we've got our people medical, right, a medical emergency. We have an annual life insurance premium, and then annual YNAB subscription, and an annual Amazon Prime. And then the last one in this category group is gifts. Now, not everybody needs to do this, but I like to separate normal gift giving from Christmas. You'll notice down here in the short-term savings, I have a dedicated category for Christmas, but this is going to be weddings, birthdays, baby showers, Mother's Day, Father's Day, that kind of a thing. Those are the, again, kind of things that will often trip us up, as well as any annual expenses, to make sure that I've been reminded of those. This is the part where you'll want to brainstorm what annual expenses you may have. So some of you, like if you own a home, Your mortgage might include property taxes and insurance, but for others of you, your property taxes and insurance is paid separate, and you'll definitely want to have categories for those. Also, be sure to think about any of those sneaky subscriptions like AAA or old magazine subscriptions. There's lots of little annual things that we will often forget about right up until the moment that it gets charged. Maybe even go through a few of your bank statements and just kind of skim them, looking for anything abnormal that you can add to your list. Our next grouping here is what I'm calling short-term savings. I like to differentiate these. In my mind, the word savings just, kind of connotates something fun, right? I'm saving up for something I want to do. I know that technically the word saving, right? I'm saving for home maintenance, auto maintenance. These are also things I'm saving for. It's just, to me, savings typically means fun. And so I like to put my travel stuff here, as well as Christmas, as well as like visiting family for Thanksgiving. Now, you'll notice with travel, I do think it's important to break out different types of travel. So I'm not a big fan of just having one category for all vacation or all travel, because ultimately there's very different types of travel you can do. Those being, number one, of course, some big vacation. And if it's a very, very large vacation that's going to cost me a lot of money, I like to have a dedicated category for that with that date in the name. So you'll see winter cabin trip 2026. And you'll see why I do this here in a few minutes when we get to targets. Now, another type of travel would be like a small trip or a long weekend. Hannah and I like to do a lot of camping. If you've seen my old videos, you know that we used to live in an RV and travel full time. We still love our RV. And so if we do a small weekend type camping trip, that's going to go here. And then the other type of travel, of course, is visiting family, which is just very different than a vacation. And I do like to track that separately. So if you visit family, or if you visit them for specific events, like visiting family for Thanksgiving, you'll want to have a category for that as well. Then, of course, we've got Christmas spending, which I already mentioned. I would also be thinking about Christmas as a whole, right? So it's not just the gifts, but there's the decorations, there's the extra food, there's all kinds of things that can go into Christmas if you really sit down and think about it. Now we get to the last of our main groups, which is this savings wealth building. Now, I like to call it wealth building and differentiate this from our other types of savings, because this is typically where I'm sending money outside the budget. Money is leaving my main checking accounts and it's going to be put to work for retirement or college planning or very long-term wealth building and savings. And so I will have a dedicated group just for that. Now, I do have two optional groups that you may want to consider. One is going to be this reimbursements group here. So if you do a lot of work, travel, and then get reimbursed, you'll want a dedicated category for that. And if you do a lot of reimbursements with family and friends, perhaps you're Venmoing each other back and forth for different things a lot, you're going to want a category for that. And then up top, I like to have this dedicated category group for 1 month ahead. We're going to talk about 1 month ahead here in a few minutes when we get to our end of month routine. But the idea is that we want to be ultimately setting aside money so that we can eventually get to where we have a full month's worth of money in our bank account that is ready for the next month. And we're going to have a dedicated category to build that up. So that brings us to the end of step number 6. We've got all of our groups created, we got all our categories with those groups, and we're now ready to move on to creating targets for every category. Now, targets in YNAB are best thought of as your plan. It's what you would like to do. If you watch this channel at all, you know that I'm a huge fan of making sure that your budget doesn't feel restrictive. It should not be this thing that beats you over the head and tells you you don't get to have any fun, you don't get to do anything you like doing. It should be something that you want to use because you know that the budget's going to help you do more of the things that you care about. Targets are how we start to plan for the things that we care about. So let's pop over to YNAB and take a look. So I'm back on the budget screen. I'm going to come down here to my bills group, and let's start with something easy like Spotify. I'm going to click just on Spotify, right? A lot of people, they click multiple check boxes and then they get confused why this doesn't show up. Just select Spotify. If I click right here, it'll only select that one. And then on the far right-hand side, you'll see it has a little target box. And if I click this Create Target button, you'll now see that I've got a whole little target setup here with a number of different options. Now, for each target, there's a few different things we'll need to decide. The first is the cadence, meaning when does this thing happen? Now, the vast majority of your targets you're going to set up are going to be monthly. It's why they have that as the default option. Spotify, of course, is going to be monthly, once a month. So I'll leave it set to monthly. Then I next need to choose the amount of the target. In this case, it's going to be $16.99. Next, I need to choose by, or the date for when this is going to happen. If I click here, I'll get a long drop down. I can choose any day of the month. In this case, I'm going to choose the 19th. And then the last bit of the target is what the behavior of the target does at the end of the month. I'm going to explain this one more here in a few minutes, but for now, I'm going to just go ahead and leave it, set aside another, and hit save. Now watch what happens. It's now going to write $16.99 more needed by the 19th in the name of the category, and it's going to turn this yellow. We're going to cover the yellow thing here in a minute. Now, if yours is not doing this, likely in the top right-hand corner, you don't have the progress bars turned on. So there's a little toggle button up here. If I turn that, boom, now it sort of collapses the categories and it doesn't write in the name. If I expand it, then it opens the categories and I can see it written in the name. I like to leave mine open because I like to be able to see the amount and the due date right there in front of me. Let's do another one. I'm going to click on pet insurance. This one happens every month. The amount is $109.88. And this one happens on the 13th of the month, and then save. And boom, there we go. Now, let me show you one that's going to vary. So with something like utilities, not only do I have varying in the utilities themselves, right? Electric's not the same every month. If I'm combining them, I also might have multiple utilities, right? Utilities, I got electric, water, gas, sewer, all of it. Over here, what we're going to do is I'm going to choose monthly, and I'm going to try and do a best guesstimate of the average amount that I need. Now, if you want to be uber conservative, what you could do is look at your utility bills and sort of pick the highest, most expensive month of the last year and then set that as your target. I don't think that's necessary. I like to just use an average. And so I'm going to do my best to try and look at the last year, or at least just guesstimate what I think the averages are. And then ultimately I can update this down the road when I need to. At this moment, I'm just trying to get close. In this case, I'm going to guess that I'm 245. I'm going to set this by the 11th because maybe that's the due date of the very first of the utilities. And then I'm going to hit save. Now we've got the hang of how to do some of the bills. Let's come down to something else. Let's come down to something like eating out. So I'm going to click here, click create target. Again, I'm going to set the cadence. Now, people will sometimes be tempted to choose weekly here. I would really encourage you to only choose weekly if you only do something on a very specific day of the week. Like you'll notice I'm going to use a weekly for piano lessons for kids because maybe they go every Thursday, or if you have house cleaning, that's every Friday, something like that. But most people, they don't eat out only one day a week on the same day of the week. So I would choose monthly, and I'm going to guess that we're going to do 200. Now, because this is a variable one that happens throughout the month, I'm going to leave this as last day of the month. I'm not going to worry about the specific due dates here. And then let's take a look at this right here. We're going to take a look at these two options. So you'll notice when I click this, I have two choices: set aside another or refill up to. Let me explain the difference. You want to think about this like a gas tank. Okay, this has to do with how YNAB treats leftover money at the end of a month. So in this example, let's say that we've got $200 for eating out and I only spend $180. That means that at the end of the month, I have $20 left over. That's what's left in my category that I did not spend. Now, when I get to next month, YNAB is going to want to know, how do you want me to treat the leftover $20? If I choose set aside another, then YNAB is going to want me to budget an additional 200. So I've got 20 in there. I'm going to put another 200 in there. Now the next month I've got 220. 20 left over from the last month plus the new 200 I put in this month. So I've set aside an additional $200. Now, maybe I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. I just want to top it off. I want to refill my gas tank. I just want to top off my target to 200. So I want you to count the leftover money, that $20. I want you to count it towards the $200 target. So that means YNAB is only going to prompt me to fill up to 180. I'm going to put in 180. That'll fill it up. And now I will have 200 total. Another way of saying this is, do you want to build a surplus in this category? over time, if you have leftovers month after month, do you want this category to grow, or do you want it to just always kind of be topped off at that level? For eating out, I don't really need that category to grow. I don't want to do more eating out next month if I come in under this month. So I'm going to choose refill up to. But in the case of something like auto maintenance or home maintenance, or in the case of something like Nick's fun spending money, I want that to be set aside another. In this case, with my fun spending money, I'm going to choose set aside another because if I don't use all my fun spending money this month, well, I wanted that to be there again next month, and I want to get more so that maybe I can save up and go buy something even bigger the next month. And so I'm going to leave it, set aside another, and hit save. Let's take a look at another example. Let's come down here to the irregular category. So open this up, and let's look at something like home maintenance. Now, if I'm in a good, income versus expense position, what I'm really going to want to do here is think about how much I might spend over the course of a year and divide by 12. So if I looked at last year's home maintenance or just did some best guesstimates, I might think, I ultimately need to end up saving a few $100s per month. But many of you are not in that position, and that's okay. What I would encourage you to do is at least set something aside here just to start building the habit of getting this stuff ready. And so what I'm going to do is hit monthly, and I might even just start with $50 a month. Then I'm going to again choose last day and set aside another because again, I want this to build up and grow. So I'm going to choose set aside another. You'll notice here that maybe the most conservative approach is to always choose set aside another. So if you are in doubt at all, just choose set aside another. The refill up to is totally fine for a handful of targets, but for the most part, you won't go wrong with choosing set aside another. And I would do the exact same thing for things like auto maintenance, vet medical, my medical. Those are all things where I don't really know when they're going to happen, but I do want to start setting aside money every single month so that when they happen, I've at least got something saved that's helpful. So that kind of covers a lot of the different types of monthly things, but let's take a look at something that happens annually. What about life insurance? Let's say that I pay my life insurance premium once a year. I'm going to click Create Target. I'm going to choose yearly, and then this time I'm going to put the full amount. So I'm not going to do any math. I'm just going to do the full amount here and let YNAB do the math. So I'll do $645 a year. Then I need to choose the next time this happens. Now, this is very, very important here. A lot of people will get this messed up. It's important that you choose the very next time this happens. And if it happens this current month, like if you're starting in December and Christmas is happening in December, set it for this month. So if I were to pay this life insurance in this particular month that I'm filming it, I would go back and I would choose this month. And then it will repeat correctly for me. But in this case, we're going to say that this happens in October. Now, another common misconception, a lot of people will set this a month early because they'll say, well, it happens in October. I want to have the money by September. Don't do that. YNAB will totally recalculate things incorrectly if you do it that way. Make sure you choose the actual month that the payment actually happens. In this case, I'm going to choose October 24th, 2025, hit save. And then now you'll notice YNAB is going to do the math for me, which is super cool. And it says, oh, well, if you need $645 by October, then you need to be saving $58.64 this month to stay on track for the $645 by October. What's even cooler is that if I don't budget this in this current month, YNAB will recalculate what I need getting back on track the next month. So if I go into January, for example, and then scroll down, now check this out. It has recalculated, now you actually need to budget $64.50 per month to get back on track to having the $645 by October. So for things that happen annually, using that yearly target is going to be a huge, huge game changer for you. Now, something similar is going to be something like Christmas spending. So what's cool about this is YNAB will also count spending that's happening towards the target as part of the target. So in the case of life insurance, that happens, one time on that specific day. But Christmas spending, what happens? Let's go ahead and do $1,200. I'm going to set yearly because I'm filming this in the month of December. I'm going to backdate it to December 25th, 2024. And then now what happens when I go into January, YNAB will tell me, you need to be saving $100 per month to stay on track. But what's cool is that if I come across some Christmas present in July and I'm like, oh, this is the perfect gift for so-and-so, I can go ahead and buy it and then categorize it as Christmas, and that will count towards the $1,200 that I've said I want to do for the full year. So that covers monthly and yearly. Let's talk about those weekly targets. Now, like I said a few minutes ago, I'm only going to do this for things that actually happen every single week. So if I'm going to choose something like piano lessons and then click Create Target, I would click weekly, and then maybe this literally does happen every Thursday, so I click Thursdays, and then I need to choose the amount. Let's say it's 55. So again, I've got my cadence, got my amount, happens every Thursday, and I want to set aside another. I'm going to hit save, and now YNAB will do the math and figure out how many Thursdays there are in that particular month and tell me the total that I'm going to need for that month to make sure that I'm on track. You're not going to use these very often, but if you do need one, it's helpful. Now, the next type is going to be something like a custom target. Now, custom targets, we don't use a lot, but for something that is not weekly, monthly, or annual, we can use a custom target. Let's take a look at this winter cabin trip, for example. If I click on that and click Create, I'm going to set the cadence as custom, and then I'm going to choose the full amount that I need. I could do 2,000, and then I'm going to set aside, but now I need to choose the date that this is going to happen. In this case, I'm going to go forward all the way into February of 2026 and hit February 5th, and then I could hit save if this was a one-time thing like a cabin trip. Now, if this was some sort of odd payment structure like a quarterly payment, then I could choose repeat, and then I could choose the amount of months or the amount of years in between that payment cycle. You're not going to use this super often, but there are a few cases where you might need something like that. Again, what's nice is just like Christmas, when I set it up this way, as I start getting closer to the trip and I start paying for the hotel or the cabin or the flights, all of that will count towards my total of $2,000 for the trip. Now, it's typically at this point, I will get a lot of questions and people going like, well, hold up, what if I get paid bi-weekly? Or what if I have some bi-weekly categories? And I hear you. On the payment biweekly thing, just know that we're going to try and get a month ahead, which is going to solve that problem. And we will talk more about that here in a second when we talk about income. But when it comes to paying something biweekly, my first question is always, do you actually pay it biweekly or is it twice a month? Because they are different. If you pay something twice a month, I would just use a monthly target and multiply that item by 2. But if you do pay something truly bi-weekly, YNAB currently does not have a bi-weekly target. It's kind of complicated, honestly, how to do the math for it. But what you can do is use a scheduled transaction. This is not something that I typically do. I'm not normally a fan of scheduled transactions because it will cause other issues for a lot of people. But if you come over here to the account itself, where the transaction happens, and then you click Add Transaction, let's say that we pay my mortgage bi-weekly. What I'm going to do is I'm going to choose the next time that this is due. So let's say that I'm actually got a mortgage payment due this coming Friday on the 27th. I would click here, and then I would click Repeat, and there is an option here to choose every other week. I'm going to choose that, and then the payee is going to be the name of mortgage company. The category is going to be mortgage, and then the amount, of course, is going to be the mortgage amount. I'll just put 800 in there for now. It is the mortgage amount that is the bi-weekly amount. And then what happens is if I'm paying this every other Friday, well, in the months that have 3 Fridays, YNAB will use this in the same way that it uses a target to basically make sure that I'm budgeting enough to cover those extra, that extra third payment. The last target type that we haven't really discussed is something called a debt target. And you actually won't see it on this screen unless you have a debt account, which again, we're not going to add, and it is outside the scope of this video. Just know that it basically works like the other targets, except that it's tied to a specific debt account. That's it. Otherwise, it's basically the same as a monthly set aside another. Similar to me not, going through here and setting targets for everything. That's what you should do next, right? That's the next step on the checklist. I'm going to now switch over to this budget where I've already set all of the targets so that we can move on to the next step. The next step is to compare your underfunded number to your income. Now, what does that mean? Well, let's come back over here to YNAB, and you'll notice that I've gone ahead and gone 1 month into the future. So as I'm filming this, it is December 23rd, 2024, and I'm going to go 1 month into the month of January, where I have not assigned anything yet. And I'm going to look in the top right-hand corner underneath the word auto assign. You may need to open that up, and you'll see the word underfunded here. Now, you'll notice this underfunded number is $8,040.93. What does that mean? Well, it has to do with your targets. So remember, we've now set targets for everything. We've got a mortgage target. We got a utilities target, right? You'll notice all of these categories have amounts in them. I've even included amounts for that irregular stuff, right? Like home maintenance and auto maintenance and small trips and all this stuff, right? We're saving up for. Now, you'll notice that if we were to add all of those together, if you were to get out your calculator and punch those in, you would notice that all of these numbers together equal the underfunded number. Underfunded is just a word that means that is the amount of money you need to fund your budget. Thus, it's the amount that you are underfunded by in the month of January because I haven't actually funded anything yet. Now, we're going to get to assigning money and funding it here in just a moment. That's the next step on the list. But for now, what I need you to understand is that this is your game plan. The underfunded number is how much you are planning to need. And so we need this number to be more or less in line with your expected income. One of the biggest differentiators between YNAB and almost every other budgeting tool on the market, like EveryDollar or Quicken or any of these other ones, is that YNAB does not let you actually budget your income. We can plan based on your income. That's what targets are for, but we cannot budget your income. But we need to make sure that our plan, the targets, are close to our income. So in this case, if our household income, in terms of the money that hits the bank account, right? I don't want my pre-tax. I want what's going to hit my bank account on a monthly basis. If our household income is around $8,000, then great, I'm on the money. I'm going to move forward. Now, if my household income is around $7,000, maybe being $1,000 high, that's certainly not ideal. And obviously, it will have to get adjusted at some point, but it's probably close enough for me to go ahead and finish out the checklist and start using the tool. But if my household income is way below this, I would actually encourage you to pause and go back through your targets and just see where you can make some adjustments. Unless you are racking up thousands of dollars a month in debt right at this moment, then you've probably just guesstimated too high on a number of these things and need to drop them down. Now, on the flip side, if my household income was like a lot higher, maybe if I took in $12,000 a month, well, then I would actually want to bump up my targets. Maybe I want to come down to my debt and, increase those targets, or maybe I want to come down to my investments or savings and bump those targets up. Ultimately, I do want this underfunded number to get very close to my income. And by the time I'm using this down the road in a couple of months, I want it to be basically dead on. But in the early phases, I'm okay if it's maybe plus or minus 10%. Something like that is going to be close enough for us to move on to the next step. But before I show you step 9, I want to come back here and say one more thing about income. A lot of people will push back here or start having questions and saying, well, hold up, I don't get paid every month like that. I get paid weekly or bi-weekly. How's this going to work for me? Well, one of the big mindset shifts I want you to start to try and make is that YNAB is going to push you to try and start thinking about your budget on a monthly basis, regardless of how you get paid, because most of your stuff in life happens on a monthly basis. And so even though your pay doesn't happen monthly, everything else kind of does, or at least mostly does. And so we want to start thinking monthly. So whether you get paid weekly, bi-weekly, or some other cadence, we want to try and think about how much do I get on average per month. So if you get paid bi-weekly, that means that I want you to try and budget based on 2 paychecks, knowing that a couple times a year, you're going to get an extra third paycheck, and then that becomes kind of like bonus money that you can put towards your big goals. Same thing, if you get paid weekly, I want you to budget around 4 paycheck amounts, knowing that a couple times a year you'll get a 5th paycheck, and then that extra paycheck can just go straight to your goals. Here in a few minutes, again, we're going to talk about this idea of getting 1 month ahead, which once you're able to do, it's not going to matter when you get paid because all of your money will start to just go for next month. And so it won't matter if you get paid right at the first of the month or if you get paid 5 times throughout the month, it will all be for the next month anyways, so it won't matter one bit. So slowly start to try and think about how much you make per month, compare that to your underfunded number. Once you've done that, we're going to start assigning our money. So step number 9 is to budget the ready to assign dollars down to 0. So let's go back over here. We talked about this briefly earlier, but ready to assign is the money up top that we need to give a job to. Now I'm jumping out of order here slightly because normally I would handle this in the daily routine, but I do want to point out this Mercury bank account has a charge on it that needs to be dealt with, and it's income. So I want to go ahead and categorize it. This is actually a deposit. We're going to call it mapped out money because that's my company paying me, and we're going to put this into ready to assign. All income always goes into ready to assign. So it doesn't matter if it's your job, your spouse's job, your second job, Social Security, doesn't matter. It all goes into ready to assign. I have a video that's more advanced methods, but will show you how to kind of differentiate your income using the payees. Doesn't matter for this beginner's setup video, but you can check that out on my YouTube channel. All this is going to go into ready to assign. Now, when I come over to the budget, I will have that money right up top. And again, if you want to do some math, you'll notice this ready to assign number is perfectly equal to my checking plus my second checking plus my savings. All of my money is in one big pile. It's as if I've gotten access to all of my dollars and I now need to start deciding what is this money for. Now, I'm going to go back over here to my checklist because I do have an order of operations here. So first is savings, second is upcoming bills, and then third is everything else. Now, this harkens back to earlier in the video that I encourage most of you not to set up your savings account, but I know a few of you have. I know you rebels, you've set up that savings anyways. And so I want to talk about what to do with your savings. Again, you should think about when I look at this Mercury savings right here that has $2,000 in it, in my mind, what is that money for? Perhaps some of you are like, well, I mean, a lot of it is like, don't touch. I don't want to touch it. And I'm like, great. Let's create a category called Don't Touch This. No big deal. So I'm going to come down here to short-term savings. I'm going to actually create a category called Don't Touch This. And I might even put like a little emoji in here with a skull that's like, hey, dude, do not touch this money. And I'm just going to go ahead and assign $500 right down here because I do not want to mess with that money. Now, the rest of my money in Mercury savings, there's $1,500 in there. What else is that money for? Well, I am filming this on December 23rd. Maybe I'm not ready for Christmas yet. Maybe I need all my Christmas savings. I'm planning on rushing out after I finish this video to finish buying everything that I need. I'm going to go ahead and put that money right down there. And then I might go ahead and put $300 just getting ready for this winter cabin trip right there. And now I have assigned all of the money in my savings account. Now, how did I do that? Well, you'll notice if I look at my group total right here, 300 plus 1,200 plus 500 all equals 2,000. I've gone ahead and assigned the savings money first. So if you have a savings account that's on budget, I would encourage you to mentally think about what that money is for out of the gate. Go ahead and set that money aside by assigning it. And then the rest of your money, you know, is going to be money that is in your checking. And again, you'll notice this number now matches my checking plus my secondary checking account. All right, now before I keep going here, it's time to take a brief moment and explain what the 3 columns are. You'll notice they have the 3 columns right in the middle of your screen, assigned, activity, and available. And to do this, I want to use a little analogy. Now, YNAB is what's known as a zero-based budgeting tool. And you may have heard before the envelope budget idea. Well, let's go ahead and talk through that as it relates to YNAB's language. If I pretend that we go to your bank, all right, so this is going to be your bank. Now, you know, banks don't actually work like this anymore, but we're going to pretend that they do. So you and I go to your bank, we go back to the back and we go to the bank vault and they say, sure, walk this way. We're going to show you all of your money. And we walk into the bank vault, and in the floor of this bank vault is all of your cash just sitting in this big pile right here. That, of course, is the ready to assign money. Now, when I come in here with you, I then look to you and I hand you a stack of envelopes. And so there's a big pile of cash on the floor. I hand you a stack of envelopes and I say, all right, what do you want to do? And before you actually start taking any of the cash and putting it in the envelopes, you first take your little pencil and you write on the outside of the envelope your target, aka your game plan. See, target is you writing on the envelope and saying, I want to do $100 a month here. I want to do $500 a month here. And we make a plan for your dollars. Then after you've actually written on the envelopes, you're going to start taking dollars out of the pile and stuffing it into the envelopes themselves. This is what's known in YNAB as assigning money. We take money from ready to assign, the pile of money, and we assign it to the envelope. If I go back over here to groceries, you can see that my target is $800 a month. Now, I'm filming this on December 23rd, so I actually only have 7 days left this month, 8 days left this month. So I only need about a week's worth of groceries. So instead of assigning the full 800, I'm just going to assign 200. That's all I actually need for the month of December. That's all I'm going to do. Now, when I go into January, I'll have to do the full 800, but for now, I'm just going to assign 2. I have now taken money from ready to assign, and it has gone down here. Let me undo it. Watch. So I undo. Watch, ready to assign, 6,576, assign. Now I'm down to 6,376, all right? So I took money out of the pile, put it in the groceries envelope. Now, I want you to pretend that when I go to the grocery store, I literally take the envelope with me. And I get up to the checkout line and then I pull money out of the envelope and I pay the cashier for my groceries. That is activity. Activity is when you spend money from the envelope. Now, the activity column in YNAB is going to get automatically populated when you import your transactions from the bank. And so, for example, if a transaction comes through, and it will often look like this, and so it'll come through and it'll say Publix or something like that, and it'll say, hey, this needs a category. And I'll say, cool. Well, let's give it a category of groceries. So I double click here. I'm going to scroll down to my grocery category and then hit save. Now, when I pop back over here to the budget, you will notice that I now have a negative $100 here in the groceries activity. If I click, you'll see that line item is actually showing up here as well. It happened on the checking account and it happened at Publix on the 23rd. That is the activity. It gets automatically deducted from the envelope as you categorize your transactions. The available column, this is like us opening up the envelope and looking inside of it. So imagine I'm trying to make a decision. I need to go buy groceries this afternoon. And I try to decide, do I have enough money to be able to buy groceries? Well, this right here is the beauty of YNAB. Historically, if I just looked at my bank account, I would look and go, yeah, I got plenty of money to go buy groceries. Look at all this money in here. But our new goal, our new habit, our new behavior is that we are going to look at the available column and we are going to see that, oh, I only have $100 to buy groceries. So I need to be very judicious when I go to the grocery store. I need to be very picky. If I think I'm going to need more than $100, I probably need to make that decision now ahead of time and go ahead and move money around and kind of see what I need to do to get plenty of money for groceries. Now, we're going to cover moving money around here in a second, but I want to hammer this home right now. Assign activity available, put money in the envelope, spend money from the envelope, what's left in the envelope. And the target, what we did at the beginning, is your game plan. So now that we understand kind of how the target and then these 3 columns work, let's continue assigning our money. By the way, as a side note, I've put a ton of helpful definitions inside that download. Again, use the link down below. You can see all the definitions, different colors in YNAB, the different definitions of the different words you see, as well as what reconciling is, as well as my troubleshooting reconciling checklist. So definitely grab that if you haven't already. All right, back to step 9. We want to do our upcoming bills. So I'm going to go back over here. I'm going to open up my bills, and I'm going to be thinking about what I need to pay next. Now, many of you will be starting YNAB not on the first of the month. Super common. If that's you, just skip anything that has already been paid this month. And so you'll notice my mortgage payment, that happens on the 1st. We're on the 23rd. I don't need that. The only bill that happens after the 23rd is the gym membership and the phone. So I'm going to go ahead and assign those. So I need $79.90 here and then $245.66 here. Now let's check my debt snowball as well. Looks like all of these are actually taken care of except the credit card interest. So I'll do that one. And now I've covered all of my bills. I'm ready to go back here and budget everything else. Now, if you're like me and you're starting this at the tail end of the month, most of this stuff, you're not going to need to fully fund your target. In fact, I would encourage you to not fully fund your target in your very first month, because I actually want you to try and use as much money as possible for the next month. So really, all I'm going to be thinking about is, what's the minimal amount of money that I need to get through the rest of this month? Now, if you're starting at the beginning of a month, then by all means, go ahead and do what you need to do. But for me, I've only got 1 week left of the month. So I might even say, Hannah and I, we'll give ourselves $20 each, but we're not going to even do the full amount. Eating out, we're probably going to need to do one meal maybe for $50. Fast food, yeah, we are traveling to see some family for Christmas. We'll do $25 on the way down. Skip that one, right? And I'm going to keep working my way down. Now, as an aside here, we're going to get to these colors in a moment, but you'll notice that all of these things are yellow unless I have fully funded them. Now, once I fully fund them, they turn green, like this one here. But in the case of something like groceries, where I only did 200, but I was supposed to do 800 based on my target, it's still going to stay yellow, being sort of an indicator light saying, hey, you haven't funded your target yet. But if that bothers me, if I'm like sick of seeing yellow, which it does me, you can actually snooze the target. So this is kind of like hitting the snooze button on the alarm clock. If I toggle this on, it takes the target away just for this month. And then when I go into January, you'll notice the target is now back. And so as you're going through here, if you're kind of like, oh, I don't need the mortgage this month because it's already done, I don't need utilities, you can just grab all these and snooze them. And in fact, if you want to grab all of them at a time by hitting Shift on your keyboard, you can do Shift Z and it'll bulk snooze them all like that. So that's what I'm doing. I'm now working my way down, trying to decide what categories I need to fully fund for the rest of this month, or what I need sort of as a bare minimum to get by. So maybe I'll put a little bit of money here, a little bit of money here, and I definitely need some gas money, and then that's it. Before I get too carried away here, we actually need to talk about credit cards. I've been putting this off, but let's go ahead and do it. When you have credit cards in YNAB that you are actively charging to, it's important to understand that you need to identify which bucket you're in. Are you currently paying off your cards in full every single month? Or are you currently, you got a little debt and you're working on chipping away at that debt over time? If you currently pay your cards off in full, you need to assign the full starting balance to the card. Let's pretend, for example, this Discover Miles card has like $125 balance on it, and I pay that card off in full. What I need to do is, as part of my assigning this setup process here, I need to actually assign enough money to cover the entire balance. This is important. I know I'm not going to pay the card to zero, okay? I'm only going to pay the statement balance. But the important point is I want to be able to pay the card to zero. So in this case, what we're going to do is I'm going to set aside $125 directly to the Discover Miles card. The reason I'm doing this is because I want the available column, which is the amount of money that I can afford to make a credit card payment with, to equal the balance on the card. That means that I can pay this off to zero. Now, let me say that again. And let me actually come down here to groceries to make this make sense. Remember a few minutes ago where we talked about that envelope? This grocery category right here, this grocery envelope, this available column, what does that mean? Remember what I just said. That is the amount of money in the envelope that I can use to go buy groceries. In the same way, if I would like to make a credit card payment, this is the amount of money in my checking account that I can use to pay the credit card. So if I'm like, I need to make a Discover credit card payment, how much can I afford to pay? The answer is the available amount in the Discover payment category. Now, I want you to contrast that with this card here. Let's say that this Chase credit card, I'm currently not paying in full. I'm trying to pay this down. Or for some of you, you pay the statement in full, but you're actually writing what's known as the credit card float, and you actually can't afford to pay it to zero. This is going to be you as well. In this case, I actually need to create a target for the amount of money that I would like to add to the card each month to eventually get caught up. So over here on the right-hand side, I'm going to click Create Target. Now, YNAB has one target type for the credit cards that's payoff balance by date. I almost never use this because it just gets people into trouble most of the time. I would encourage you, unless you have a very specific reason why you need it paid off by a specific date, like if you're doing a 0% card, I would choose this pay specific amount monthly. And so that's going to be the flat amount that you want to add to the card each month. If you don't know what amount to put, I would start with whatever the required minimum payment is. Just put that in there for now. That'll be fine. You can eventually adjust that over time. Don't get lost here. I know we're kind of doing a side note here. We are still in step number 9 where we are assigning money, but I need to tie a bow on this credit card bit here. Keep in mind also, I have a dedicated video just on credit cards in YNAB because they are the most confusing part of this program. I would encourage you to check out that video next. If you do have credit cards, it is linked down below this one, but let me give you the high-level overview. I want you to think about your credit card payment just like another envelope. So I'm going to draw a little envelope here just because I'm running out of room inside the bank for the credit card, okay? Why does this matter? Why is this happening this way? Well, let's go back over here. Let's again look back at groceries and let's try to understand something. If I were to ask you, where is this $100 physically in real life? You would say, well, it's in one of your bank accounts. I would say, yes, that's right. The available column represents real money in my bank account. So if I go and use it, let's add another transaction. Now, again, I'm adding them manually just for the video. Most of you will just link the transaction so they'll get pulled in from the bank. But if I go to Chick-fil-A and I put that in the fast food category and I spend $20, what's going to happen? Watch, I'm going to hit save. My bank account balance just dropped by 20 bucks, right? I swipe a debit card, $20 leaves the bank account. When I go to the budget, I come over here to my fund spending category. I look at my fast food line item. I assign 25. I spent 20. I have 5 left. That makes sense. I spend 20 bucks at Chick-fil-A. Money leaves the bank account. It's gone. It also leaves my category. Now, let's go charge to the Discover card. I'm going to go to the Discover card. I'm going to charge AT&T, so my phone bill. $145.66. Hit save. Now notice, I'm clicked on the Discover account this time. So when this charge comes through, what happens? My bank account doesn't change. Right? I didn't spend money from the checking to pay for AT&T. I borrowed money to pay for AT&T. So my debt went up. A second ago, my Discover miles, let's delete this. A second ago, my Discover miles said 125. Once I added it in, now my Discover's up to 270. Okay, so I borrowed money to pay the AT&T. Now, when I go to the budget, watch what happens. If I come down here to bills, YNAB moves money from the phone and internet category. Hang tight. The available column is the money in my checking account. That's real money that I have. So YNAB took it. Where did it go? It moved it from here up to the Discover payment category. Let's come back over here to our envelope. Basically, what just happened is when I spent money from my phone and internet envelope, rather than it just going to AT&T, okay, it didn't do that because I borrowed money. What it did is it left the phone internet envelope and it went into the credit card payment envelope. Now, later, I'm going to make a credit card payment and then the money will leave, right? Then the money will get paid to the credit card company. But for now, the job of the dollars changed. The dollars are no longer to be used for the phone and internet. The dollars are now to be used to pay the credit card company for the phone and internet bill that they paid. Let's do another one. If I go to Waffle House and I do some dining out and I spend $45, and then I go to Best Buy and I buy something for Nick's fun money and I spend $20. And I do some Amazon shopping, but this time I'm not putting it in Amazon. I'm actually going to put this one directly in Christmas because I got something big, $500. You'll notice that all of these charges have now run my credit card up to $800. And if I go to the budget, it has moved money from all of those categories. It took money out of Nick's fun spending. It took money out of groceries. It took money out of the eating out category. It took money out of the Christmas spending category, and it put it right up here in the Discover Miles credit card category. So here's the cool thing about YNAB. If you budget for the actual expenses themselves, right? The eating out, the fun spending, the groceries, you don't also need to budget for the credit card payment, because you've budgeted for the expenses. And so YNAB moves them to take care of the credit card payment for you. This is what allows you to use a credit card, but not end up buried in credit card debt. Now, what this means is that for those of you who pay your balances in full every month, you always want this number right here, this available number, to match this outstanding balance here. That means you can afford to pay the card to zero. But for those of you that are working on chipping away the debt, what you need to do is set a target to your credit card category, budget for just that target, and then anytime you charge to that card, let's go ahead and add a charge here. So let's again do BPN. Let's say I bought something for Christmas for $200. And now you'll notice if I come to my Chase credit card, I can make a $305 payment. That is a combination of the $105 that I added plus the $200 that I charged. So this keeps me from racking up debt by budgeting whatever I've spent, and then I can budget additional to eventually get me totally out of debt. Again, you'll want to watch the credit card payments video deep dive to understand this more, but for now, this will suffice. Let's come back over here to our checklist. We are still in step number 9. We're trying to get ready to assign down to 0. And at this point, let's pretend that I have budgeted for, most of what I need in the month of December. And I'm just ready to go ahead and start thinking about January because next week I got a mortgage payment to make and I got other stuff. Well, this is where the next month's money comes into play. I can either go ahead and take all of this money and just assign it right down here to my category, which is great. And then on the end of month routine, I can take this money out. Or if I want to get, gung-ho about it, I could go ahead and just click into the month of January and start assigning my money down to my categories. For now, I'm going to leave it in the next month's money. We'll use that in our end of month routine here in a second. Now, it's typically at this point where we're assigning money that I will start to get some questions about, well, why can't I just go ahead and budget my next paycheck? Like, if I know I'm going to get paid this Friday, can't I just go ahead and, put my mortgage in here and go ahead and put my utilities in here? Why can't I do this? And you'll notice that I now am getting a large red number at the top of my screen. And I see this 10 times a week. People will send me screenshots and be like, hey, what's going on here? I got this big red number. I can't fix it. And I go, you have assigned more than you have. This is one of the biggest mindset shifts that you'll need to make when it comes to YNAB. You are only allowed to assign money that you physically have in your bank account. Let's go back to our little bank envelope analogy here. If I wanted to put money into an envelope, I had to have it in the bank account, right? I had to have it in the pile of cash. I can't put money into envelopes that I don't have. To show an extreme example here, let's just come down here to Nick's Fun Spending Money, and let's put a really large number in here. Hey, look, the available column, that tells me what I can do, right? That's what I'm allowed to buy. Well, that says I have $154,657. Or I can go buy all kinds of stuff, right? Well, obviously, we can just go look at my bank account and know that I can't go buy $157,000 worth of stuff. And in fact, YNAB tells me that. It says, hey dude, you have assigned $156,000 more than what you actually have in your bank account. So I need to take this and put a 0 in here and unassign that money. In the same way, in this case, I've now assigned $2,000 more than I have in the bank account. So I need to unassign this money. I'm going to go back here and put zeros in the assigned column so this money goes back up. Now, why is this so important? Well, this is what keeps you in budget. This is what keeps you from making dumb spending decisions because it forces you to only spend money that you physically possess. Right? Remember, the goal is we're going to shift our behavior to where now, instead of me just deciding that I want to buy something and then just buying it, I now have to go look at YNAB. And let's say that I do want to buy something, right? Something comes up in my Instagram feed or whatever, and I'm like, oh, I really want to buy this. And I need my next fun spending category to do it. Well, if I come look at YNAB, I don't have any money. And so I either need to wait until the next payday, at which point I can assign more to next fund spending, or I need to make a trade-off. I need to make a decision. Maybe I go, you know what? Hey, Hannah, I don't think that we're going to end up using all of our pet expense money this month. Would you be cool if I took, $25 from the pet expenses and moved it to the Nick fund spending category? And we could have that conversation. And then I can move 25 from this envelope up here to this envelope, and now I can go buy $25 worth of fund spending. And so if I just start, assigning a bunch of stuff when I don't actually have the money and I get this big negative red, well, then it looks like I can go spend money that I don't actually physically possess. That's going to lead to me running up debt or overdrawing my bank account. So it's very important that you don't over-assign. You'll notice when I did that it turned the negative red. Let's go ahead and talk about the rest of the colors in YNAB. So the first color is, of course, green. You're going to see that in the available column. That just means you're good to go. You can think about it kind of like a stoplight. If it's green, you can go through it. There's money there. You've hit your target. Good to go. If you see a negative red number, that means that you cannot trust your budget until you get this fixed. So the first type of negative red is the over-assigning. We've already talked about that. Let's talk about the next type of negative red. This is where you overspend. Let's say that I do decide to buy something. I really want this new BPN hat, and I buy it even though I don't have enough money in my category. It comes up to $39.99. I hit save. Now, guess what? When I come over here to the budget and I come down to the Nick Fund Spending category, you can see that I now have a negative red number. That means that I have overspent. Basically, I spent more money than what was in the envelope, what was in the category, and now I need to fix it. I actually get this little notification right up here as well that if I click on it, it will filter my categories for just the items that I've overspent on, which is kind of nice. So at this point, I need to cover my overspending. What I'm going to do is I need to decide, well, I did spend that money. Where do I want to take from? So again, I say, hey, Hannah, are you cool if I take the rest of our pet expense money and use this to cover my hat? And if she says yes, then great. Then I'm going to hit this. And then now guess what? It's going to move money from pet expenses into the Nick Fund Spending category. If you scroll down, now pet expenses has $10 left, whereas the Nick Fund Spending is now nice and clean and zeroed out. And if I ever want to look at this, by the way, you can actually click this button here and it will show you all the recent movements of money, where you've taken money from and where you've put money into. You can see I used money from pet expenses to cover Nick Fund Spending. Obviously, you can see all these other moves that I've done as I've been filming this video. So that's the next color. Negative red in the overspending is in the available column, and that also needs to get fixed. Now, the other color type we talked about briefly, which is this yellow, and yellow can mean one of two things. If you have a yellow that's like this, where the amount is positive or zero and it has a little pie chart, that means that you have a target that you have not fully funded and you didn't snooze it. Let's come back down here to groceries. So if we take a look at groceries, you'll notice that it has this little wheel, and it's a little pie chart actually, and you'll see that it's about 1/4 of the way filled in. And that's because I assigned $200 and my target, where is it? My target is $800. So 200, 800, right? It's 1/4. And so it fills in about 1/4 of the pie chart. If I had put 500 in here, it would fill in a little more than half of the pie chart. The yellow just indicates that I haven't met my target. And again, if I want to turn that off, I can snooze it. But let's talk about the other type of yellow. Let's say I go to the grocery store and I need to do a big Costco run. And I put that in my groceries category and I end up spending $250 at Costco. Well, now what happens is that I will be overspent, but this time it will be yellow and it has a little credit card symbol with a little exclamation point next to it. That tells me that I've overspent, just like I did with the Nick Fund spending, but this time I overspent on a credit card. It is important that you cover this overspending as well because you don't want to run up credit card debt. But it's not critical in the same way that covering the overspending of the red is. The negative red is overspending on a checking or savings or cash account. And that money has left your bank. It's left your wallet. It's gone. You have to cover that. This overspending is on a credit card. So what happens is if I don't cover this, YNAB will not move the money to my Discover Miles card. If you notice, my Discover Miles doesn't match my balance anymore. That's because I haven't covered the overspending. YNAB couldn't move any money to the credit card because there was no money to move. And so if I don't want to rack up credit card debt, I need to cover this. In this case, I'm going to take money from gas and move that to groceries. Now it also moves it to the credit card. I'm going to take money from pet expenses, move that to groceries. And I'm going to cover the rest from our phone and internet bill. Once I've done that, it covers all the overspending here. It then moves it to the credit card. I am good to go. So again, thinking about it like a stoplight, green, good to go. You got money, you hit your target, rock and roll. Red, this is bad. Stop right now. Fix this. It's either overspending or overassigning. Yellow means pump the brakes. Hey, slow down, pay attention. If it's a positive yellow number, you have not met your target. If it's a negative yellow number, you've overspent on a credit card. Now, unfortunately, there are times where you have to go into debt. Sometimes that happens. Life throws you some curveballs. And in those cases, if you need to do that, well, you just have to leave the negative yellow there, overspent. And then ultimately what happens is that in the next month, it just goes away. You'll notice it's no longer negative in groceries, but my credit card is now off. And at some point in the future, I will need to assign extra money to the credit card to get that debt paid off. That's essentially all it means. All right, that finally brings us to the end of step number 9. We are ready to finish the last step of our YNAB setup checklist, which is we're going to start practicing our daily routine. I'm going to scroll up in the document here, and you're going to notice that I've got 3 recommended routines: our daily routine, our payday routine, and the monthly routine. Let's walk through the daily routine. The reason I like to do this daily, and this is critical, a lot of people are like, can I do this like once a week or so? No, do it daily. Here's why. If you do this once a week, it is going to take you a lot more time because you're going to have way more transactions. But I promise, if you can do this daily, even the families that I've seen who like spend a ton, right? They've got teenagers who also have credit cards, like parents have credit, it's stuff going all over the place. Even those families who spend a ton of transactions, on average, I see maybe 5, 6, 7, 10 transactions at the most per day. So if you wait a full week, in that family, you could have like 100 transactions. Now, in most people's budgets, you're probably only going to have 2 to 5 transactions a day. And if each transaction takes you less than 30 seconds, you can literally be done in less than 5 minutes. I use what James Clear calls a habit stack in his book, Atomic Habits. Love that book. The idea here is we want to pick something that we do every single day automatically without even trying. You don't need a to-do list, right? So drinking coffee, making your bed, getting the kids ready for school, checking email, brushing your teeth, doing your nighttime routine, whatever it is. Pick something that you do every day without fail. Even if it's not at the same time, you still do it. And then use that as the trigger for your new habit, YNAB, right? And so we're going to stack our daily routine in the budget up against the thing that we already do every day. For me, this is coffee in the morning. I cannot remember the last day that I have not had coffee. And so coffee is easy for me. I get up, I start making the coffee. Oh, that triggers, check YNAB, pull out my phone, breeze through the daily routine. By the time I'm done, coffee's done, I can get on with my day. Now, let's talk about this daily routine. So the first step in the daily routine is we need to record, if you're doing it manually, or approve and categorize your transactions. So let's pop back over here. Now, you'll notice if you're paying close attention on the desktop that on the left-hand side, there are now some white dots next to the different accounts. Those white dots indicate that there are transactions that need to be dealt with. Now, if you're doing this on the app, then you're going to see a banner at the top of your screen that tells you the number of transactions that need to be dealt with. But over here, there's white dots. I need to deal with them. Let's click into the Discover card. Now, you'll see them kind of listed here. They're sort of bolded or have yellow, but if I want to just filter my view for just what needs to be dealt with, I'm going to click this header at the top of my screen. So I'm going to click that, and then now I've got just these two transactions that need my attention. So one is Wawa. Well, this was gas. Now, obviously, it could have been anything, but I know that this was gas, so I'm going to double click it and type gas and then hit save. Next is the Netflix. Well, that goes to the Netflix category. And approve. Now you'll notice there's no more white dot. This account, good to go. Sweet. Let's move on to the next one. Next, I'm going to go to the checking account here. And you'll notice that I have one transaction to deal with here. And you'll notice that this one, YNAB has actually already guessed. The transaction is the Waffle House, which YNAB has learned, oh, that's your eating out. Now, a lot of people will not do anything with this. YNAB got it right, so they don't do anything. But YNAB does want you to approve it. And the reason is because YNAB could guess wrong. Especially this is true for places like Target or Amazon or Costco where, it could be anything, right? Just because it was that last time doesn't mean that it's this time. And so in this case, YNAB did guess correctly. I'm going to click this little I right here and then hit approve. Now I have no more white dots. All my transactions are good. I'm done with the first step. Next, I'm going to move on to covering overspending. So pop back over here, go to the budget, and you'll notice I now have 4 overspent items. Let's click overspent, and now we can see them. So first is Netflix. Oh, that's just a bill. I forgot to budget for it. I didn't realize I needed to. Let's click here and cover this overspending. Now, in this case, normally I try to cover overspending with money from the same month. But if it's my very, very first month, I'm just going to take it from next month's money and not worry too much about it. Eventually, though, I don't really want to touch next month's money. I do want to try and get in the habit of going, oh, I overspent here. That means I need to say no to this thing over here. Cover all this overspending. And now I have no overspent categories. I'm done with step number 2. Now, the next step, like I say here, is optional. It's reconcile. I like to do this daily because I do link my accounts. I have a whole video on reconciling. You should check that out. I'm not going to cover it in this video, but reconciling is basically just making sure that what the bank says you have in your bank and what YNAB says you have in your bank agree with each other. So you will want to watch that video and understand that process at some point. Just not going to cover it here. Now, the next is the last step, and this is really just getting in the habit of starting to look at YNAB before making decisions. So again, if I needed to go to the grocery store later this evening and I wanted to make sure I had money, I would need to come down to my groceries category and I would notice, oh no, I don't have any money for groceries. So at this point, I either need to wait until next month when I get more grocery money, or I need to decide where I can take money from so that I can go buy groceries. Maybe I'm like, no, dude, I gotta have groceries. I'm not gonna touch the don't touch this money, but you know what? The winter cabin trip is still a ways away. I can just, take a little bit from there. I'm gonna take $50, move that to groceries. That'll get me some eggs and milk and bread. And that's enough for now. I'll be good to go. I'll worry about getting more groceries in January. And that right there is the end of our daily routine. The next routine, of course, is the payday routine. Now, for some people, this will only happen once a month, but for others of you, it happens every single week. Basically, whenever you get new money into your budget, this is the routine you want to run. Now you'll notice it starts with a daily routine. That means get your categorizations done, cover your overspending, all of that stuff. Let's go ahead and let's add one transaction just to make this make good sense. I'm going to add in some new income. So again, mapped out money. That's my business paying me. Let's go ahead and put a couple $1,000s in here. And you'll notice I've categorized that into ready to assign, right? Remember, all income goes to ready to assign. So now when I come into the budget, you'll notice that I now have more money up here that I can assign down to my categories. Now, in this case, though, I'm still finishing my daily routine, which means cover the overspending, check YNAB for categories before spending, etc. Let's assume I've done that. The next step on the payday routine is again to reconcile the main accounts. Now, the reason I say main here is if you have a bunch of accounts, if you're tracking assets and debts and all kinds of stuff, I just update those once a month. But your main account, so your main checking, your main credit cards, you should be reconciling those at minimum every payday. Again, I do it almost every day, but at minimum, you should be reconciling them on payday. The last step of the payday routine is to assign your ready to assign dollars down to zero. What that means is we want this number to go down to zero. Now, a lot of people will get confused. They think that this number should match what's in their bank account, and that is almost never true. It matches what's in your bank account once, right when you set up YNAB. After that, you've assigned your money. And so YNAB now has all of your money down in your categories. So the ready to assign represents the amount of money you have remaining in your bank account that has not yet been given a job. So in this case, it's the new income. Now, if I were actually doing this today, December 23rd, I am already good for December. I don't need any more money in any of my categories in the month of December. So I'm just going to put all of this into next month's money. But if I had needed more money in any of my categories, I would, of course, start with my bills and my debt snowball and kind of work my way down, assigning money down to my categories based on where I need it before the next payday. That brings us to the end of the payday routine, and we're ready to show you very briefly the monthly routine. Now, I have a dedicated video on the end of month routine. Would encourage you to watch that one because there's a little bit more involved here. But the basic idea is I want to walk through, of course, my daily and payday. That lets me know that all my transactions are done, everything is reconciled, I can trust my numbers. And now I really am adding 2 steps to the monthly routine. The first is I want to decide what to do with what I call your breadcrumbs, right? These are the little leftover scraps that you didn't use at the end of the month. For example, if I come back over here, let's pretend now that it's actually January 1st and I'm running this end of month routine for December. You'll notice, like in fast food, I have $5 left. Hannah has $20 left. Groceries, we have $50 left. These are the breadcrumbs. These are the scraps that are left over at the end of the month that I didn't need. What do I want to do with them? Well, I like to consciously make a decision. So either I'm going to leave it in the category and let it roll over for the next month. So for things like auto maintenance, home maintenance, travel, Christmas savings, I want to leave all that money, right? Because those are things that I want to grow and build up. I don't want to touch that money. The next option is I could move it to a specific category that you want to do more with, like increasing savings or debt pay down. If you have a big financial goal that you're currently focused on, let's move it there. The third option would be I could move it to ready to assign and use it for the next month. And I would encourage most of you, if you are not yet 1 full month ahead, which many of you will not be, and that's okay, I would encourage you to consider this option. What we're trying to do is really push to get 1 full month ahead, which also acts as a 1-month emergency fund. So it's a huge financial win when you can get there. And so in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my available column. And in fact, I could even use this button here to just filter for just that. And I can go, all right, well, where did I have leftovers that I don't want to just sit there? Well, if for some reason I had money left in the gym membership because maybe I budgeted and then realized it was already paid, I don't need that money. I'll take it and move it to ready to assign. Phone, internet, same thing, ready to assign. Credit card interest, same thing, ready to assign. Fast food, ready to assign. Groceries, ready to assign. And the rest of these I probably need to leave. The short-term savings, the tithing, and the credit card payments, I don't want to touch those. So now we are ready for the final step of the monthly routine, which is I want to assign my money into the new month, into that next month, right? So I'm going to come here. I'm going to take all of the money out of my next month's money category. Now, keep in mind, I'm doing this in December. So you've probably, if you're doing your end of month routine, it's already the new month, you're probably already selected. Let me undo this. You're probably already in like January, for example. I want you to go back. So go back to December and put a 0 right here. That'll put all your money right up top. Then come into January, and now I'm ready to start budgeting for January. Now, I could go ahead and do this one at a time. So I could click right here, 6, 7, 4, 5, 5, 2, 4, 5, or I could do that. But this is the beauty of targets. Targets save us time. So if you remember earlier, when we were talking about this underfunded number, if I want to, I could just click the underfunded button, and now YNAB will automatically budget all of my money based on my targets. Now, in this case, it doesn't have quite enough to do the full month, right? My full month is over 8,000. I've only got 7,470 in here. And so it's going to go as far as it can, first checking by the due dates of items, then working its way down. I'm going to click Assign. And now you'll notice everything that's green is now fully funded. I do have a few yellows that it has not topped off yet, but I can do those on my next payday routine, and I am now good to go. Now, at this point, there's one optional end of month routine process, which is if you're a little more advanced and you do have those tracking accounts, asset and liability accounts, now's a good time to go ahead and do a reconciliation balance adjustment on those and get those up to date. But at this point, you're done with the monthly routine. Everything is up to date. You are ready to jump into January and start using this on a daily basis to help improve your decision making. And this is why YNAB is so powerful. It helps you get super conscious about actually using your money to do the things that you care about the most, whether it's an awesome trip, saving for your kid's future, getting prepared for retirement, or just getting out of debt. But having YNAB set up is not enough if you want to see real change with your money. In fact, it's just the first of 3 steps that I use with all of my clients to help them achieve their dreams. To check out steps number 2 and 3, you'll want to watch this video right here next. I'll see you there.